Hello and welcome back to the Londonderry Bands Forum to the Beat of the Drum series of podcasts for Good Relations Week. In this podcast entitled An Outsider's Perspective, I'm joined by Sean French, who's originally from Belfast and is studying a PhD at Cambridge University, especially looking into marching band culture. Sean is currently living in Londonderry and has grouped himself in the marching band scene over the past few months, visiting previous band practices and has been volunteering for the Londonderry Bands Forum and Northwest Cultural Partnership. This podcast looks at how, as an outsider from the band scene, the bands have welcomed Sean and what he has learned and what the future holds. Sean, can you tell me a bit about yourself?
I'm Sean, doing a PhD in social anthropology, so kind of like sociology, but with more of a focus on culture. And then I'm in Derry for the year, living here and interviewing people and trying to immerse myself in the band culture here to understand a bit about how things are changing. And so I've kind of been helping out and talking to people at the bands forum about how the perceptions around the bands have been changing in recent years. And then I'm also looking at this in the context of the wider politics in PUL communities, and also maybe looking at other styles of music in Derry and the politics around those different styles of music too. For example, traditional Irish music.
You're from Belfast originally. How much upbringing did you have in the band culture?
Not really. I'm from a sort of Catholic background, I suppose. I'm not religious or anything, but in terms of the sort of identity, I suppose. My dad's from the Republic, so he's from County Louth, and then my mum is English, so she's from London, but then both her parents are from Belfast, and they were both Catholics from Belfast. And then I only moved to Northern Ireland when I was 4, so I was born abroad, and then I lived in the countryside in County Down for a while, and then moved to Belfast when I was 12. But I went to a Protestant school, but even there, I don't know, I didn't really have that much contact with some of my friends when I was a bit older, when I was around 16 to 18. They would have been, all into the bonfires and the marching and stuff like that, and we would have kind of talked about it a fair bit. And it wasn't it wasn't super divisive or anything, but we definitely had different opinions on it, and we definitely would have, as an outsider, you see the burning the flags and that kind of thing, and it's hard to think of that as something positive, but the way they saw it was a lot about sort of family events and stuff. They were saying it's not that big a thing, and I think as I've gotten older, and especially doing this research, I could see more where they're coming from about all that.
Was marching bands talked about within your school or your friendship circle?
Definitely wouldn't have been talked about by teachers or anything, and then not really by people who you weren't friends with, but it was more I had friends from both backgrounds, and it was kind of more just curiosity, it was just sort of this interesting thing, which is quite sort of, I don't really know much about it, even though where I live, the marches and the parades and stuff go down on the Ormo Road, where I grew up, so it's right on my doorstep, but you just don't know much about it, because it's always sort of feels like this thing which you can't really go down to, there would be a bit of a fear, I suppose, which I think is probably ungrounded for the actual parades themselves, of course, maybe some of the bonfires, it's a different story, but yeah, there is this kind of apprehension.
Where did the apprehension about parading come from?
It came from other people, as in family members and sort of Catholic friends and stuff like that. It just kind of gets spread around like that. I don't know if I really would have paid much attention to the media when I was younger, when I was early teenager and that sort of thing. But maybe their views came from the media in turn, But no, it was, I don't know, a lot of people would have just been quite sort of, intimidated by it, I suppose, because of the perceptions of it. And maybe that's stemmed by the media, but I don't know if I could really confidently say that, make that link, because in my experience it was just sort of people would say this to you, but I went down to the 12th, I remember once, just out of curiosity, just before any of this research or anything, in the centre of Belfast, just to have a look, and I was just it was just interesting going around, but I just went on my own, because one of my friends would come with me, and I walked about the place and was just looking at it all, and I don't know, yeah, I just found it sort of interesting, I suppose. Is it is this quite sort of, it feels foreign, even though it's on the doorstep as well, so it was kind of partly why I'm interested in it, more so than I would be interested in doing research with something more familiar to me, I kind of enjoy learning about something which is, it feels new and quite different,
Did you hear any positive messages about breathing when you were growing up?
No, not really. Like, you wouldn't. I mean, to be fair though, it's not something that was like really closely following when I was younger too. It's not like I was, really invested in the whole breathing issues. Like, but no, it's I mean, the kind of things people will talk about because they're the kind of, I suppose, exciting in a negative way, or the interesting things would be the disputes. Like, and I think as well, there's a kind of common perception maybe of like, no matter what the bands do, like, I mean, and maybe this is quite a cynical thing, but I think often people will assume, all right, yeah, but they're just doing that to be seen more positively or something. But I think after doing this research, you can definitely see that it is genuine with a lot of people. That it's, it is just sort of, a family event for a lot of people, and I'd feel fairly confident saying that, like, yeah, that definitely seems to be the case for a lot of people. But I think from the outside, like before me coming to do this research, like people were saying to me like, all right, yeah, no, there's just only a few people, like, but they're saying, they're just doing that for a kind of surface level change for to be accepted, which I think is quite challenging to overcome. Like, because how do you ever prove that you're genuine? How do you actually convince people of that? Even if you are, like, people can always sort of say, oh yeah, but it's not really genuine. There's always kind of something being hidden there, but like, how do you prove that you're not hiding something?
Why have you learned about marching bands?
There's something which should be appreciated is like how kind of diverse the whole band culture is. That's something I didn't really appreciate that much before coming in, is that like how there's a whole range of attitudes and a whole range of opinions, and even within one band it seems, I mean, I'm still kind of learning about it all, but it does seem like it's really diverse and the things people think and feel. And I think something people have complained about in the interviews as well is that, like, something that one band does one year will be jumped on and sort of, shown to by the media, to exemplify like the whole band culture totally, if it's in a negative way, which I agree is definitely unfair. Like, and so I think that's something as well which should be appreciated. It's not just one thing which has one meaning for, like, this group of people. Like, it's a really kind of diverse set of people. Like, I mean, there's so many people involved in bands too, like, so it's kind of hard to reduce it down to clearly being one thing, which I think people often do from the outside. They'd be like, oh, that's all about, whatever, sectarianism, or even that's all about culture or whatever, like, because it's not, it's a lot more complicated in practice. Like,
what did you do as an undergraduate, and how did you get into a PhD?
I did anthropology as well, from undergraduate in London. So that was like a mixture of social and biological anthropology. So the social side was kind of like sociology, and then the biological was like human evolution kind of stuff. And so you're just studying people in a kind of broad way. But then ended up writing a final thesis. So I was more into the social anthropology stuff, and I wrote the final thesis on ironic political humour in Belfast. So people making jokes about like politics and political violence and that kind of thing. And I really enjoyed doing that research, and I got really into it now, like, and then I was sort of talking to my supervisor at the time, and about maybe going on to the PhD and stuff, like, and so I ended up just applying, and I thought like, I don't know if it'll happen or not, like, but I was thinking maybe of going to teaching English abroad if that didn't work out and stuff, but then it did work out, which I was very pleased about, like, so yeah, I just went straight to the PhD, like, and yeah, pretty much it.
What did you want to find out about marching bands?
I wanted to understand how people understand it themselves, I suppose, and also about how the whole process of, the stuff that the bands forum's doing, how the whole process of is depoliticizing it, in inverted commas, how that would actually take place and go about, and how do people contest what is political and what isn't political, and how does that all get negotiated, and then also I suppose some other questions too about how does music become involved with politics, and comparing that maybe across some different disciplines, and then understanding through that case study, I suppose, about how political identity might be changing for at least some people in Derry.
You've thrown yourself into the PUL culture, attending praise and volunteering for Newgate. Was there any apprehension about going to any events?
But no, people have been really welcoming and all, though, it's been very like easy, I suppose. I think though to not feel like you're kind of just watching people do things, but be doing stuff with people as well. I think that is a much nicer dynamic, you know, because then you're just sort of doing something together and you can like learn from that, I suppose. So I kind of want to get more involved in playing with music later on. I play music with people like later on, you know, because it just feels like a nicer way to like learn about stuff as opposed to, you know, kind of just watching from the outside. Like.
Did you appreciate the musical ability, especially from young people on parade?
I suppose something I appreciated more, like from because I've been learning the flute a bit as well. The B flat flute is like the actual musical ability of it all, you know, which a lot of people say is underappreciated, and I would agree, you know. Is that yeah, whenever you see them out on parade, like and having tried to learn the flute, like you appreciate actually how difficult it is to do that, you know, and to march while you're doing it and to play it all really well, like. And so yeah, you know, I think it's an impressive spectacle, like, you know, the whole thing. It's a impressive like ability of all these people to do this thing, like, and it looks good, you know, and it's really like it's got an energy about it, you know, like the volume and the intensity of it all, like, you know, it does kind of fire you up, I suppose, you know. So yeah, it's been good.
You volunteered during the Fringe Festival. What did you make of that?
Yeah, it was good. So I think the biggest event of that was the kind of split comedy night with the historical lecture thing from those guys. I can't remember their names. Tim
McGarry.
Yeah,
He's from Get My Head Piece and from the Lean Game and all, and then Dr. David Hume.
Yeah. Yeah, that was interesting. Like, you know, so yeah, no, it was good. Like, it was you know, definitely significant as well. Like, Tim McGarry was in the Apprentice Boys Hall doing a stand-up routine and, you know, making jokes about Protestants and all that, and it was all good, you know, it was all just sort of like fun and people were like laughing at themselves and he was like making fun of Catholics and stuff too, like, so, you know, it was nice, you know. And yeah, so you know, it was a good week. Like,
you also attended Bonfire Discussions as part of the Fringe Festival with Derek. What did you make of them?
Yeah, so I went to two of those discussions. So one was in Top of the Hill, and then one of them was in Tullyally. And so they were quite different. I mean, the one on Top of the Hill, I think they were mostly Catholic background. But in both situations, though, to be fair, like, you know, the young ones, like the teenagers and stuff, like, they didn't really have much of an opinion on it, which might sound insignificant, but it was also kind of interesting that they just didn't really seem to mind either way that much, you know. Like, we were kind of, well, Derek was trying to get them to sort of give their opinions on this stuff and that kind of thing, and, you know, maybe it was just like sort of angsty teen attitude, like, but I mean, they just sort of didn't really seem to have much of an opinion, you know, which I think is relevant in itself, you know, like, they don't really like care that much, I suppose. But they were talking about the I can't remember the name of it, but the bonfire where people in Papa the Hill a few years ago, where people came and they wrote messages for people, like loved ones who had died and that kind of thing, and put them in this bonfire, and then the whole community came out and it burnt it together, and they were all going on about how great that was, you know, which I thought was really significant because it happened like a couple of years ago now. But, you know, it was all like in their memory about how great that was and how positive a bonfire that was, which I thought was interesting, you know, and that, you know, seemed like a way to go, you know. And Derek as well was talking a lot about the Lewis night in England where they have a bunch of burning things. And he was saying like this is a way that it could be more positively done, like, and I think they were all pretty receptive to that, you know. And then the Tullyally one, like, it was similar again. I mean, the younger ones didn't really like speak that much, you know, or have much opinions on all the stuff. But yeah, then the older ones, you know, I mean, they were talking about like how to make bonfires better, all the kind of usual stuff about not burning toxic materials and not putting offensive things on it and stuff, like. But something as well I thought was interesting was like, and people mentioned it quite a lot, was that like the amount of organisation and, you know, it's impressive basically that like I think one of the ones in Caw maybe, you know, they raised like $8,000 just from like going around collecting from doors and that kind of thing, and it takes a lot of like, you know, organisation, especially there's like teenagers doing this, you know, for the most part. It's impressive like, you know, skills and abilities to do that, like, which is something I wouldn't have really like thought about before, you know, just to be able to generate $8,000 like for this project which you want to do, you know. So I suppose that whole side was pretty impressive as well.
You've interviewed members, attended classes and practices, so how did the bands react to you?
Yeah, everyone's been super welcoming, you know, which has been really nice, like a lot more so than I thought they would be. So yeah, like Andy here, like especially has been really like, you know, great, like, so just taking it upon himself to like teach me flute man, been introducing me to other band leaders and stuff like that. And so yeah, and Derek as well, he's been really good in terms of kind of making me feel welcome at the William King practices and stuff like. So it's been really good. And then I think now I'm sort of trying to get in contact with other bands, who maybe are like less used to researchers coming in, because I think the Churchills and the William Kings are quite used to like journalists and stuff coming down a lot. So I think I should be meeting with East Bank at some point, and then Burn Talent as well. But I think that might be quite different because they're not so used to being interviewed and things, But they've been very friendly and stuff so far. But it might be a bit of a different dynamic, just less used to like kind of having people joining in who I suppose are outsiders in a way, like, But I don't get the impression they're going to be unfriendly at all. Like, they've been really nice so far. Like, so.
Still have a while to go yet, but what did you learn about marching bands and the bands forum?
Yeah, definitely learned a lot. Like, I mean, I think the main thing, like I mentioned before, was just the sort of complexity and the diversity of it all within the culture. Like, it's not one thing. And the way there's different styles of music for different bands, and people have different connotations about those different styles, and different bands from different areas all have a slightly different feel. And then even within the bands themselves, it's not like people have some kind of homogenous political opinion. So it's been I've learned loads in that way, like about how complex it is, I suppose. Which definitely isn't something I don't think I would have appreciated before, and probably a lot of other people would appreciate too. They don't have one fixed meaning, the bands, that they're, multiple meanings.
What's next in your studies, and what else do you want to do while you're here?
I think you're just going to keep on interviewing people, and I think the big thing that I haven't done yet really is learning more music myself, and trying to get involved in learning maybe on a regular basis. Like, so I don't know if that's going to be possible, like, but hopefully I could get that going in some way of being able to get a bit more immersed maybe, and not sort of just watching from the outside, I suppose, being able to kind of learn a bit and from the inside and get a kind of feel for what it's like on a kind of everyday basis, I suppose. And so but I'm in Derry until like next September, so I have loads of time to just kind of keep on learning about stuff. And I think I'll probably get involved in Irish traditional music a little bit as well here, and then just kind of, I suppose, have a bit of a compare and contrast about some of the questions I've been asking with the bands, and see how it's different with the Irish traditional musicians.
The theme this year for Good Relations Week is Brighter Days Ahead. Do you think we have brighter days ahead, and can the bands be at the forefront of it?
I think definitely it definitely does seem brighter in the future, I mean, even all the work like with the bands forum, and I think Derry especially, like a lot of people have said that that the relations are particularly good in Derry, and some people have said to me as well, like, I couldn't have done this research in other places in Northern Ireland, because I suppose the relations aren't as good. I didn't really know that before doing this, so I was just kind of lucky that I chose to come here, like. So yeah, I mean, I think definitely, people talk about the Derry model quite a lot for how things can be, and then I think they run workshops and all, like, in Derry for other places in Northern Ireland to come and learn about why it worked here, like. So I think definitely there's a brighter future ahead, like. And even like I was saying with the Bonfire ones too, like, the fact that they just didn't really care, it might seem like a negative thing, it might seem like they're all sort of like disengaged and whatever, like, but in some ways, like, that's kind of like the fact that the only reason they really seem to be going to the Bonfire, like, is because it's fun, it doesn't seem like they have some super strong opinion about all this kind of stuff, which is probably a positive thing, and so I think the bands can be at the forefront, definitely, like, if they like keep on going the way the bands forum have been promoting them, and keep on doing what they're doing, basically, like, it definitely seems like it's working here, like, and so I think other places could probably look at the work that's been done here, like, and learn from it, and things definitely seem like they're going pretty well here, like.
How did Praise in Londonderry and the mentality compare to other areas in Northern Ireland?
I don't know if I could confidently say at this point, like, because I'm still sort of early on in the research, like, but I think something people have said to me, is that other places, like, they're not used to compromising, I suppose, because they're a lot more kind of homogenous. But in Derry, like, you know, people know each other and there's a lot more kind of interconnection, and it's a bit of a more personal feel in somewhere like Belfast. And there's less like huge homogenous areas of like just one group. I suppose it is a bit divided on the river, like, but still, you know, less so than other places. So there kind of has been that that kind of I don't know what the word is, yeah, but I don't know, with this kind of stuff as well, I don't feel like, you know, I don't feel like I'm in a place to authoritatively say, like, you know, yet.
Many students in your situation, especially PhD students, would leave home and not come back. What made you come back?
No, I mean, I think maybe, I know people like move away for jobs and all that kind of stuff and more practical reasons, but I think also like for people doing the anthropological research, it's pretty normal to go to different countries and to go somewhere more like, you know, exotic, so to speak. But I don't know, but I suppose in some ways, like, I'm kind of an insider to all this culture, but also an outsider in other ways, you know. Because obviously, like, I'm not from the whole PUL community, like, but also like I've kind of grown up around all that stuff, you know, going to the Protestant school and also just, you know, seeing the parades all the time, like down my street and stuff. So yeah, you know, I think it still kind of is different enough for me to find it interesting, you know, because I think maybe the whole you know, Catholic nationalist side of it would just be too sort of familiar. It wouldn't be as interesting to me, like. So I think it is a kind of unusual dynamic in that way, because I think for a lot of people it's just like the place they're from. It is, you know, probably too familiar to be that interesting to do research on, maybe. I mean, in anthropology anyway.
Would you now be more positive about people expressing their culture?
Yeah, I say, well, even, you know, since I started doing this research, I think, you know, I wasn't like super negative before or anything, like, but I mean, I definitely would have thought, I think just knowing people on a personal level and actually like just sort of hanging out with people and having a sort of like actual friendship with individuals, you know, it makes a big difference. And, you know, I know it sounds kind of cliche or something, but just sort of, you know, we're all people and connecting and stuff on that level, like, you know, it kind of makes all this stuff seem not as important, like, you know.
Thank you to Sean French for joining us today, and we wish him well in his future studies. You can join us again tomorrow at 7 o'clock for another podcast about the Hamilton Flute Band in Swinford, and then following that, Hamilton Flute Band in concert.